Gabe Blanc, thank you so much for coming on to Toronto, the
Chris?
Politics, the show today.
Chris, I'm very happy to be here.
At long last, right?
At long last.
Gabe, we initially started chatting earlier this year because we were, both young men who care about Toronto politics.
Sure.
And I think that's something we've both taken advantage of or recognized the opportunity is that there's a lot of municipal interest right now happening online, and doesn't feel like people are necessarily being served that through existing media channels. Can you maybe talk to me a bit about just how you've been leveraging social media throughout your campaign so far?
Sure. I'll just start by saying, in terms of there's being a lot of interest, the turnout rates in municipal elections in this province are dismal, and they've long been abysmal. So
why do you think that is?
Well, frankly, with the lack of political parties and the strength of incumbency that comes with that, it's very rarely the case that an incumbent loses. And so it's very hard for people to imagine change elections. It's very hard for people to imagine what voting will do for them. And then it becomes a chicken and egg sort of situation where that only increases the benefits of incumbency. When a populace is not very engaged, the folks who currently hold power have a much easier time holding on to it.
And you recently had an interaction with the incumbent in University Rose.
I certainly did, yeah.
What happened there?
So I, on June 29th, released a video about my plan to fix the 506 College Carleton streetcar, one of the worst in our city, which is the worst in the world in terms of streetcar speeds and reliability. So I released a plan that was pretty comprehensive in terms of everything we could do infrastructurally, technologically, and then just better uses of urban space to speed up the 506, or fix the 506 was what we called it. And it did quite well, to the point where about 8 days afterwards, my city councillor moved a motion to fix the 506.
You won. You haven't even run in the election yet, and you're already achieving policy change.
Well, yes, I'm going to take that, but I'll take it as a qualified victory because the motion there was one at the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, and there was one at the TTC. One was about what the TTC can do, and the other was about what the city can do. And, this is a motion for a report back.
Yeah.
And pretty much everything at the city is just a motion for a report back so that staff can create some recommendations that the city then works with. But what you end up with a lot of the time is if a councillor wants to pay lip service to an idea, but not spend any of the political capital to get the project over the finish line, they can move that motion and then kill it in the report stage or kill it on committee or just let it sit until everyone forgets about it.
I think I heard someone say once that at any given time, there's at least 1,000 reports back to council outstanding that don't feel like, they ever get tracked. There'll be some quick win or maybe it makes a headline, but then we just lose track of it very quickly.
I think of anything good that you want to do. The city of Toronto has studied it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that these ideas have never been considered. It's just that sometimes they're considered purely as lip service.
And additionally, cities are natural experiments. It's not like there's any new idea you could have in Toronto that hasn't existed anywhere else.
Oh, absolutely. Everything that's included in our plan is just how other tram systems around the world work. Right? So, and what's frustrating often is that the opposite argument, that just because something works in every other city around the world, like say, modern track infrastructure for streetcars, a councillor or even a member of staff will tell you, well, things aren't one size fits all. So Toronto is unique, but I think it's worth questioning. While we can acknowledge that Toronto is unique, is it so unique that international best practice doesn't apply to it?
There's this sort of small c conservatism that I think can creep in to say it's also why I feel like social science is often very not agreeable for some people on the right, because to them they interpret it as how dare you say that I'm like anyone else? I'm an individual. The moment we start saying I can be predictable, I think people feel like they kind of lose agency. And that's why I think public transit can even just be scary for people, because it's how dare you tell me that I'm going to be using this track versus that track? When you look at the existing city council, why do you think, what are the macro trends you're seeing on city council that make you feel like they're not necessarily responding to some of the trends, the things that young people actually care about? What are you seeing? Why aren't they moving faster at a time where it feels like we know all these good ideas?
I do think there's a bit of a generational bifurcation in terms of approaches to transportation. Young people post-COVID very low rate of getting our driver's licenses. And since like, I'm like throwback Numtots.
Yeah.
Since Numtots, there is like a subculture among young people.
You want to explain what Numtot is?
Yes, I should. New urbanist memes for transit-oriented teens.
Remember when Facebook was a thing?
Yeah, when young people were on Facebook. But I'll tell you, like, in certain places, like you can still find this very active subculture on Reddit sometimes or on Blue Sky, places where I find like I have the most success trying to get across my ideas in terms of like, actually, it's more efficient for everybody when we prioritize public transit. It's better for the environment. It's better for the economy. It's better for quality of life. So these subcultures still exist, but I do think there's a generational divide.
And it feels like who ends up engaging with municipal politics, typically, it's going to be an older, a richer demographic that prefers to drive everywhere. Feels like those views end up getting represented more at City Hall.
I think age is one thing, like generation for sure, but the other people who are more engaged in municipal politics are homeowners. They feel more that they have a stake in their local politics. And it's not that renters don't have a stake. It's just that sometimes, they need to be mobilized, energized, have that communicated to them to understand what it is exactly that municipal government can do for them.
How do you do that?
It's a good question. I believe that it is possible. Maybe we can talk more about this later, because I saw in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary that the turnout level by age band was the opposite of what it almost always is. It was declining with age as opposed to increasing with age.
And of course, you're just copying everything that Zohran Mamdani did, right? Like Zohran invented social media.
Yeah, the 9:16 format.
I think he was the first person to hold a camera vertically, I saw.
I do remember when he said, "Hey, New York," I was like, wow, there's
something there.
No, well, I mean, we both copied John Wilson there.
I think as well, like, I think the foolish assessment of the New York City mayoral race was that, like, Zohran did vertical video and therefore he won.
Yes.
No, it's that Zohran understood his community and understood the issues that appealed to them and leveraged the communication that seemed to be effective there.
Well, I think you're totally right. And this was a thing we established early on in our campaign, is that the way to get to Zohran is not to actually copy the style, but to copy the substance. And that will show through in the style, right? Like the Zohran font with that serif, those colors, the orange and the blue, New York City's municipal colors, the triangular drop shadow that the logo has, like those are so indicative of like bodega coffee cup, not to mention, again, the use of the municipal colors. So what we thought, this is just one example, is, the way to get there is not to take Zohran's colors or font or anything like that. The way to get there is like, what is iconically Toronto? And we thought the TTC subway station font was one of those things. We're also looking at like branding like Lambos and Lunch Lady of Saigon and, all sorts of places that
Lambo's the sandwich shop.
Lambo's the sandwich shop. We were not looking at, that would have been very off-brand for us. Yeah. And then, the colors of line 1 and line 2 for our logo, because University Rosedale has both sides of the U of line 1, and it's got most of the middle of line 2. So, showcasing what is special about University Rosedale and having the love for the place show through in your politics. That's how you get to Zohran, not by, copying what it looks like on its face.
Also critical, I think, for Zohran was a lot of community activism, like a very thorough advocacy community that he activated. What does that look like for you? Like, what are some of the people on the ground? How's that energy been like for you? I feel like you're doing more canvassing than anyone else in the city right now.
I think we probably are doing more canvassing.
How's your foot doing, by the way?
Just as I'm shifting my weight off my bad foot, it is doing a lot better.
That was an iconic shot, I think. Did you have it when you were doing the nomination?
I did, yeah. I was wearing the boot for the nomination. Yeah.
Was it kind of like Vince McMahon showing up in a neck brace? Like, was it just sort of, just marketing?
No. My foot hurt for much longer than that. And actually, after that, it was only after my nomination that I started getting pain in my other foot from something that was more like in the tendons as opposed to in the bones. So
you're not a lefty, you're balanced.
I'm balanced. I'm a centrist, really. Yeah, both my feet hurt.
Yeah, so how is the canvassing going? What are you hearing on the doors?
Canvassing is such a rush.
Mhm.
It is a lot of fun. I recommend everybody do it, even if it's not for me. You get to learn so much about your community. You get to learn what like works for people. I think if I had like on May 1st said, now I'm choosing to run for office, and I'm going to come up with a list of policies that I think match the priorities and the demographics of Ward 11 University Rosedale, I would not have come up with fixing the college streetcar.
Mhm.
That streetcars were so on people's minds as the laggard of our public transit system is something that I learned having started canvassing in February. And especially given how important the 506 is to all of the Chinatown, Kensington, College Park, Little Italy, where I live, realizing how important it was to all of those neighborhoods by just talking to people is how I found out, like, you know, this is not a wonky numbtots issue. This is actually a winning issue. And I think we've seen that since launching that policy.
I think there can maybe be a concern sometimes around public transit that it's more of a concern of the upper class sometimes. Like I'm even told on occasion, like, oh, the fact that you don't drive means you're privileged, you know? And that doesn't really feel the case in Uni Rose, where like if you're taking transit, you represent a very broad swath.
You're the majority. If you don't own a car in University Rosedale, you're in the bigger half.
Can you imagine owning a car in University Rosedale?
I cannot. Actually, I can, because I do drive sometimes. Mea culpa. I drive my dad's 2009 Subaru Impreza. And I have, before we got this office, I used to move signs around and boxes of literature around in my dad's car. And I'm trying to park in University Rosedale. But I'll tell you, like, I don't need it to be the most convenient way to get around, because I live in a ward with 4 streetcar lines and 2 subway lines, the 2 busiest subway lines in the country, with 15 subway stations. I don't need to be able to find parking everywhere, like right next to where it is that I'm going to shop, because we live in an amazing global city that has a great public transit system. You know, I'll be the first to say one with problems, but you know, it's such a gift to Toronto and Canada. It
can feel sometimes like these downtown wards are treated purely as a pass through for people who don't live in the wards. You know, I was chatting with Councillor Chris Moyes last week, and you know, he brought up Toronto Centre triples in size every day, you know? And it can feel like sometimes the people passing through don't have the same priorities as the people who live there. How do you balance that? Like, how do you make sure that, say, the business owners who live in your ward, how do you ensure that they feel like they're heard just as much as the people who live? Or maybe that is maybe not the compromise you need to be making.
I do think one of the consequences, I won't say it's a problem, but one of the consequences of our system where we have local wards as opposed to an at-large system like Vancouver's municipal elections, is that a lot of councillors can benefit a ton from internalizing benefits and externalizing costs.
Especially, you can donate to any campaign you want. You know, if you live in Vaughan and you drive in every day, you can
donate to a mayoral campaign
if you wanted to, for sure.
If you were interested,
you know, say Corey DeVille or whoever.
I don't know who that is. But I didn't know who that is, but yes, what I'll say is, like, I think this is the original use of the term NIMBYism. It's like, yes, I'd like to benefit from, say, a sewage treatment plant, I would like there to be more places for unhoused people to go, but I don't want it anywhere near me. And so it's not in my backyard specifically. And that leads to like a hot potato buck passing thing where the costs are almost inevitably externalized to the poorest, the most marginalized community. That was the original like term for NIMBYism that came from environmental racism. And yes, there's absolutely still that problem. We see councillors or community groups demanding that we get rid of the Shelter Delegation Authority, which was a fantastic change I think the city made, where councillors could not continue buck passing with where we were actually going to you know, build the infrastructure that we need to help get people off the streets. that shelter delegation authority has made it much easier to actually address the homelessness crisis. And some conservative politicians are trying to go backwards.
Yeah.
Some more conservative community groups are demanding that other councillors go backwards on that. So
we have seen some shuttering of safe consumption sites in the city. What effect do you think that's had?
Pretty much everyone I speak to about the problem of open drug use in Toronto will acknowledge that it was a huge mistake from the premier to go backwards on what we had, which was a place for safe consumption, and that has led to more statistically open drug use.
There are other people running in this ward. Why are you, Gabe? Why are you the guy? Can I ask first off, why do you want to run for city council?
That's such a good question.
It's such a shitty job to have, it seems like. People yell at you all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to get things done. You're only one of 25 votes. Like, why is this something you want to do with your life?
Well, I'll push back a little bit on that and just say that, yes, you're one of 25 votes, but your vote is only part of the impact that you can have in terms of things like, it sounds a little boring, but like traffic calming, making streets safer. The amount of discretion that an individual councillor has over their ward is actually pretty significant, much more than, say, an MP has, where an MP gets a certain amount of funds to, like, okay, we're going to put a new hospital here, for example. Like it's completely different in terms of the amount of local discretion. And that's really exciting to me because I happen to live in, I think, the coolest part of Toronto, and having that sort of discretion to make it even better, to take what is great about University Rosedale, the transit connectivity, the diversity of people, the diversity of housing types, the density of students, and like lean into those things more and see that within 4 years in my own community. It's also another reason why, and I think this is something that's been really unique about our campaign, we've been pretty insistent on making promises that we can keep.
We need a Gabe tracker, a Gabe promises tracker.
Well, you know what? If I get elected, I'll do it myself. I will absolutely do the thing that the mayor of New York City is doing, where, he is letting you know which promises were made and which promises were kept, right? Like promises that excite people, which for us includes things like speeding up a particularly problematic streetcar line, or fixing the inequities in our property tax system. Those are things that are actionable by city council within 4 years. And my goal is to, fight as hard as I can for them. So I'm not making promises that are either too vague so that I wouldn't be accountable to them, or promises that are outside of my control. And I know, like, so much of what is making life in this city more difficult for renters and for working people is actually outside of municipal control. And it's really frustrating that I can't go to people and say, and I'm going to bring back your rent control after Doug got rid of it. But I can't. And I don't want to lie.
I think there's also value, though, of being an advocate, that I think there's the bully pulpit. Like, even look at Olivia Chow with like the price surveillance pricing stuff. Like, is that something that's happened a lot in Toronto? Does she really have the power to like unilaterally stop that? That's tough to say. But it's important to have like the mayor say this is a bad thing.
Absolutely.
And it gets some coverage,
No, I think that's right as well. And by the way, like, I'm not going to pretend like I've done zero policy advocacy on things that are outside of municipal jurisdiction. I have. But I've also tried, even when I do that, to have it be things that are somewhat original. Right? Like, for example, in my housing platform, I included a plank that was advocating for the ability for the city to separate property taxation based on the value of the land and the value of the building. Super wonky, right? But super effective for solving a problem that people see in their everyday lives, which is a lot of vacant lots, a lot of incredibly valuable land in the downtown of the city of Toronto that is just not being used because it is essentially a bank. It is a store of value for a developer or a particular corporate landowner. And because they are waiting for the value to appreciate before they take any risk on developing it, Torontonians don't get to benefit from whatever it could be.
And it's this gap-tooth urbanism, which has a spillover effect on the rest of the street, where if you have a couple of vacant properties, well, it just makes people a little less likely to keep walking along that street. And, the other businesses in the area start to suffer a little bit.
There's a home on Montrose and Crawford that has been like that for decades. It's like right around the corner from where I live. Whenever I knock doors in that area, people point it out to me. And so, saying land value tax would fix this, or I'm a Georgist.
Do you want to explain a little bit more about land value tax?
Sure. Well, it's just like I said, splitting the value of the land and the building and really increasing taxation on the value of the land. That way, landowners are not punished for increasing the value of what is on top of it. A thriving business or more homes, like that shouldn't be something that a landowner is punished for. What they should really be paying for is the right to use something that belongs to all of us, which is the land in our city, right? So
how do you feel though then about the Yellow Belt? Celiac was on the podcast, mutual friend of ours. His argument, I don't want to speak for him, but we look at a lot of single family housing, of which University Rose does have plenty, that has been locked in time in this low density housing. And because you can't build anywhere except for arterials, it means that it's basically like, we up the value of our arterial roads. That's the only place you can build. And the property tax burden increasingly goes to our businesses. How do you feel about that?
I think that's entirely correct. Yeah. No, Dan and I, I'm sure, could talk about that all day, although we'd be agreeing with each other a lot.
Could you see yourself being in support of any sort of rezoning of the Yellow Belt?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, so right now in the city of Toronto, we've got so many residential zoning classes, and the consolidation of some of those to have like a more rational zoning framework, I think would go a long way. Some of these are pre-amalgamation. A lot of things are grandfathered in. And so I think our zoning framework does need to be updated with an eye to like, how can we get the most of what actually serves Torontonians and the 50% of us who rent. Right?
How do you think you balance the ambitious needs of a present council with the backlash that'll inevitably result? I think the story that's always looming large for me as a former, as a Calgary refugee, maybe that's not a very polite way to frame it, but as someone who left Calgary, they went for a very ambitious blanket rezoning, as it was described. Any place that was single family housing is now, as a right, can do kind of like up to a 6-story. That was so politically disastrous for that council that they were essentially wiped out. A whole new council comes in, and then they, repealed that law. How do you balance that? Like, how do you know what the incremental step is versus when you need to be doing something more radical? I mean, that's a tough question. It's case by case, but.
And what I'll say is like, I support all of the incremental steps too. Like the sixplexes as of right, that exists in several wards, although not all of them, I think is great. And I think over time, I'd like to see more wards opting into that. There are any number of ways that these things can be framed and communicated to people. And there are any number of things that we could do. Like, maybe if it's not a blanket rezoning, like things like transition zones. Dan will tell you a lot about this, but the Yellow Belt has increased development pressures on major streets by so much that, let's say, dive bar at Bathurst College, like that's one of the most valuable places where you can create new housing. And so all of those pressures are being put there when there are, neighborhoods 2 blocks away that could be welcoming a lot more people, but aren't. So transition zones, I think about courtyard blocks that people adore in Barcelona and in Paris. A lot of it is framing. And frankly, a lot of it is being good at politics. Like you have to have the communication skills to get people on side with your big projects. And our current political system does not reward good politicians because it rewards inaction. You don't need to be completing ambitious projects in order to get reelected. The benefit of incumbency is so strong that yes, if you do something ambitious like they did in Calgary, you might get voted out. But if you do nothing, you're very likely to keep your job. And that's not a good incentive structure for people, especially in a city that needs change. Like any city, cities are changed. They're constantly evolving and they're supposed to be dynamic. But we have a council now with a lot of very long-term incumbents where the median councillor is older than Doug Ford. There's room for change and there's room for growth, but our electoral system does not reward it.
I think an example that's made me feel very positive lately is it's all the DIY urbanism that's happening in the city. You know, you look at Rodney Chan putting forward the pedestrianization of Church Street. You look at what's happening at Christie Pitts with the DIY skate park. I feel like we're getting a greater appetite for community-led projects. I'm curious, one suggestion that Cheryl Case of the Coalition for Responsible Community Development put forward was to get a pledge for council candidates to allow for certain like community-led projects to go forward. Does that sound like a kind of an idea that's good for you to like give budgets to residents associations?
It wouldn't necessarily need to be residents associations, right? But I do think we need to be careful in terms of how these funds are distributed. But I have no opposite. I'm not opposed at all to the idea of community-led development. I think that's really great. And I think we see good examples of it, like if it's Pitt's DIY or the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. Like there are good examples as well.
I think we can maybe have some trauma for urbanists, the municipal left, when it feels like whenever community gets involved, it's often around stopping things from happening.
That's exactly right. And you know what? One of the things I really appreciated about the Kensington Market Community Land Trust is this project that they did, I believe in collaboration with students from the University of Waterloo, which was, what would a community land trust led neighborhood look like? And they had models and they had descriptions of like, what could Kensington be if we were doing more? And it was not Kensington as it currently exists, frozen in amber, right? So yes, like the local control, that exacerbates the problem that I was talking about, where sometimes like a local group is mostly focused on externalizing costs and internalizing benefits, but it needn't be. And some of these land trusts have been really great advocates for what more can we do for our community, including how can we welcome more new people.
And I think when you give people the budget or just the agency to feel like, oh, I can be a part of the change, it maybe makes growth feel less of a scary concept.
I think that's right. Like people don't trust developers and for very good reason. And so when growth feels like it's imposed on folks, they're much more negative on it. But nonetheless, like I think growth is important. I think it's something that the city needs to keep doing. I think it's something the city needs to be more ambitious in. But the idea of community-led development as being part of that, I think will create a broader coalition for growth.
Gabe, something I think there's a lot of great policy ideas you put forward. I think we would agree. I think the difficult thing though is that the fortunate part about University of Rosedale is that y'all are lousy with progressive candidates. Like, why you? Like, if someone is looking at this interview, looking at your campaign materials, I think there's probably a lot of similarities with other candidates in the field. Like, why are you the person to be elected?
It's a good question. I'm a policy professional. I have my master's of public policy. I worked in policy at the city. And so my approach is really focused on, again, what are those levers that we can pull to make life more affordable within 4 years? Now, I'm also trying to build a vision for the long term. And I think that vision is unique. I'm not just going to say in this ward, but I think in Toronto municipal politics, where it is undergirded by a love for cities as experiments in sharing space. Cities are places where we bundle our commutes via public transit, places where we share space via denser housing, and all of this enables so much. For me, I started as a climate activist, and I initially mostly focused on how much it enables in terms of better lifestyles with lower carbon emissions. But now I think about how much it enables in terms of community, a rich social life, a thriving economy. Cities like Toronto are a gift to the world, and I think we should share it with more people. And I've rarely seen Toronto municipal politicians embrace that quite so explicitly.
It sounds like, I think a lot of the strength of your campaign, as I can say it, is like you are a very good communicator, I think, on a lot of these issues. What is like, when you look at councillor right now, like what, and even just as councillor,
Yeah.
like what do you think people are doing badly that you think you would change? Like what's an approach to working and being a councillor? You get in, like what are Gabe's first 100 days?
Yeah. Well, one thing, wouldn't be a first 100 days thing, but it would be a longer term project over at least 4 years, is the approach to changes in a community. And it's something that I've learned watching Councillor Josh Matlow, which is that, for a long time, councillors could reap a lot of political benefit from riling up their constituents by saying, we are going to stop this, or we're going to end this development or this homeless shelter. And Councillor Matlow has benefited a lot from taking a more even-keeled approach where he goes to his constituents and he says, look, like, how do we get to yes? Instead of, I'm going to be your loudest advocate for no. And that gets people angry. It gets people excited. Maybe they lose that battle but later they still remember that you were on their side. I think more councillors could benefit from taking Councillor Matlow's approach of what's like a solution instead of what's the thing that will get the loudest community advocates the most excited.
University of Rosedale, I think, is probably one of the most politically engaged wards, not just about what's happening in Toronto, but overall. What do you think is the role of radical politics when it comes to a ward like University of Rosedale? When, how do you think it's the role of a city council to balance the concerns of people who are, shutting down a street, like encampments at U of T? Like, how do you view that? Like, what do you think is the role of radical politics in a ward like University of Rosedale?
Yeah, there's a strong role here. I mean, the university and student activism, I think, is super important. When I was a student, not at U of T, I was involved in some activist groups at U of T, like one called Stop Ecocide Toronto, which was very focused on crimes against the environment globally. And I think I learned a lot from knocking doors with them. I think also I've learned from my prior history with the Green Party and from even what I'm doing now, where I recently just got a live demonstration of when you demand what you want, like a fast 506, and you do it loud enough, it gets heard. And being that radical flank can get change done. So I think it's incredibly important that we have people who are principled, that we have people who are organized. It's an asset for this ward, I'll say.
Wrapping up here, anything else you'd want to mention that sets you apart in the race? Like what do you think are some issues that are maybe not getting the light of day that they deserve? What's something you'd hope people would recognize?
A couple of, I think I would just say that the ambition to put forward actionable policy and then the communication skills to build a constituency for it, as opposed to waiting for the existing constituency to come on side, is really important. And then the last thing is just being at every single door, and not stopping with that, because I think after I win, there's still going to be a lot of work that needs to get done in terms of getting people on side with fixing the 506, right? Or engaging renters about ending the tenant tax markup. That's work that's going to need to keep being done. And so I'm not going to stop knocking doors ever.
Gabe, it's always a pleasure
Chris,
to chat with you.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Toronto the Politics, the show. My name is Christopher Chiasson. I'm Toronto the Politics, the show, the host. If you would like to follow the show along on some social media platform, we're on Instagram at Christopher Chiasson, as well as at Toronto the Politics, the show. We are on Blue Sky. If you like this show, please consider leaving a rating. You'd be shocked by how many tears you can make me cry with a positive review. If you have any feedback for the show, or if you'd like to get in touch for any reason, you can do so at torontothepoliticstheshow@gmail.com. If you have any show ideas, anyone you'd like me to interview, any sort of feedback is always appreciated. Thanks for stopping by. We have 3 shows a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll see you at the next one. How you guys doing?